how could an individual like you or I influence the market in Indiana to bring in more people? Or is that even a possibility? Because at the end of the day, it's the consumer that you'd have to influence, and we can't just make everybody like the music that we like, right?
Of course not. Yeah, no. I would love it if Indianapolis like got into a dubstep phase. That'd be sick.
I just need Virtual Riot to come here, dude. I just need
we
Virtual
can beg
Riot
and plead. We can hit Virtual Riot up on X all day, and I'm sure that we could get something going. Like I'm sure if you or I are thinking,
we'd have to take a financial loss personally, but we can make it happen.
You'd be surprised how many times I approached a buyer and said, "Hey, I think this artist would do really well," and they go, "Who?" And I'm like, hey, you have a whole untapped market for electronic music here or rap artists specifically. Like in Indiana, we don't book a lot of big rappers, even though we would have them. We definitely have the market for it. And so I brought on, are you familiar with Black Tiger Sex Machine?
Yeah.
So I actually convinced the owner of the Bluebird in my senior year as part of a project, as part of my music industry career or schooling. I was to be involved in the production of a show, and I was going to figure this out on my own. So I went to the owner of the Bluebird and I said, here's 10 artists that I think would sell out the Bluebird that I would love to see personally. I didn't even tell the dude I wasn't 21, so I couldn't even enter the venue during operation hours. And I'm giving him advice about who would show up. So I gave him a list of artists, and he goes, "Oh, I'll look it over." And he hits me back up. He texts me and he goes, "What is Black Tiger Sex Machine? Is this even a band? Like, what kind of weird shit is this?" And I was like, "Dude, they're probably one of the coolest live electronic shows that I've ever seen. And if you've ever seen Black Tiger Sex Machine, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Very crazy production. You talk about a video synced to some music. 3 fully built, 3D printed, custom Panther helmets with lights and eyes and laser beams, and 3 dudes across three production setups, live electronic drums sampled, I'm sure, along with probably some live mixing on CDJs. Very complicated, high-tech production. Even they were within budget for the Bluebird.
Wow.
And they bought I think it was that next fall season, that next student return season, they had Black Tiger Sex Machine, and it sold out the Bluebird that year.
You pulled it off.
I didn't even get to go because I wasn't 21.
That's crazy.
I was there. I wasn't wandering around or anything, but yeah, it was a very cool show. Big Wild also was, I was not influenced. I did not influence that. He came with Odessa that year. But Odessa, another one of those artists that fall into that live electronic category that is, just absolutely incredible. Starting super small at some shitty dive bar, a dive bar tour, right? And then they end up with a big stadium tour before they retired, I think, which was this last year. Unofficially retired, I think. But
nuts. Well, okay, we're gonna get Virtual Riot in Indy somehow.
So you could go to a buyer. You could go to Josh Brown, owner of MOKB and Do 317 here in Indianapolis, and you could say, "Hey, JB, I think Virtual Riot might sell at least 1,200 tickets, but Virtual Riot, I'm sure, dude, his production, he's got to cost close to $100,000
seriously
to book him." I'll give you an example. So Flume was on 2016. Flume had just released a really banger album. In between when we started talking to his agent and when we were going to book him for this show. And I remember our budget was about $100,000 for the whole thing. And Flostradamus came in and was at number 2. And between the time we reached out to all these different agents about booking a show, we reached out to Flume, and Flume I think was $90,000 to $100,000 for his cost to do the show. And in between the 3 months, he had this huge album come out. I think it was Grammy nominated, and it jumped to a quarter $250,000 in 3 months. So you want to talk about the marketplace of an artist? It can change just like an asset, like a stock, right? That you put out a Grammy-winning album, and your line goes up. The cost of your show just doubled, And so sometimes like that, you'd have to default back to another artist that is willing to pick up that show at that price.
Do you think somebody like the guy you're talking about that owns the venue would be open to a proposition where I say, "Hey, it's my 27th birthday in January. I want to bring Virtual Riot in. I will front the $100,000, but I want to make my money back first"?
No.
Okay.
That's the first part. I think you're coming in you had me in the first half, not gonna lie, but the second half, I don't think that they would allow you to take part in any of the profit sharing.
Even if I fronted the cost?
That'd be a tough proposition.
Damn.
But I would imagine like the guy that I talked to, he probably wouldn't be like the buyer. He'd probably have some say in it maybe. I don't know what his exposure is these days, but whoever their buyer is right now, you could reach out to them via email and say, hey, I have this idea, because it's really just like an idea. It's like a trade. Like, hey, I think that you guys could sell however, with the new venue, let's just take their new venue, for example, 1,200 tickets. I think you could sell 1,200 tickets at, $60 a piece. And would that, I don't have my calculator handy, would that cover the cost of bringing on someone like Virtual Riot? And they would be able to go to whatever their technology is that they're using to make
their
informed
Virtual
purchase.
Riot, their Virtual Riot stock market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They would go and they'd do some research, right? They'd do like their good old fashioned, research, and they'd say, okay, what other markets has Virtual Riot played a show in recently? Are any of them comparable to indie? What were the ticket prices? What was the average cost? Their buyer would reach out to Virtual Riot's agent and say, what show openings do you have during what periods of time and what exclusion zones? Because if he's playing another show, he might have an exclusion zone saying he can't play another show in this geography during that period of time, as to not take away from the ticket sales of the larger, more important, already established event, which is fairly typical for festivals, which is why you don't see a bunch of artists playing like pop-up shows around a festival, because they're excluded from doing so, because they know that they could capitalize on the already existing market there. So you'd have to take that in a vacuum and say, can Virtual Riot sell enough tickets at a certain price that would make it profitable for us to run this show? And that would be the unfortunate reality of your question, is that we don't know.